Hello. Welcome to Build Day. We're Finsweet Live Build Day every Friday. It is 9 a.m. Eastern, and we're here with Alex Iglesias, Finsweet's CTO. And today we are taking a deep dive into the Webflow.js front-end library. This is the JavaScript file that's served with every single Webflow site. So we're going to look at what this library does, what it's all about, what to think about, what you can do, what you can't do. And Alex is going to explain all of this for Build Day. Alex, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. I'm super excited. I mean, this topic, I'm guessing a lot of people is very interested in it. So yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
I think a lot of people are interested about it because there's really no information about it online. If you go and
Mm,
try to really look into this Webflow.js file, you may find some information, but there's not going to be a full overview of this file of what this is about. So yeah, I'm also curious. I know a little bit about it after working with you and more technical people at Finsweet, but I know I was confused about it. I still am confused about it for a very long time. So let's get ready to learn. First, before we
mhm.
do that, let's say hello to people in the audience. Thank you for coming and watching us live. We have Leon, first time for a live event. Welcome, congratulations. All right, we have Magdalena. Hello. We have Neil. How you doing? David, what's up? We have Tom, and Tom's from Norway. Great. Jesse, hello. Pablo Cortez, hello. We have Magica, Rohan. Great. Grayson and Chuck. Very cool. Great. Hello, everybody. And Alex Shaffy. Hello. Cool.
Hey,
All right. So let's jump right into it. Let's do this.
yeah,
Alex.
that's it. I would like to say something before we start, um, because as you well said, this topic that we're talking about is something that it's completely undocumented. The Webflow frontend library is something that Webflow uses internally to add all the features that you can natively implement in Webflow. And I believe, I really believe that library was not meant at any times to be exposed so other people can use it. Because today, I think that we're going to split the topic in two separate parts. The first one is we can just see what's actually doing this library, and the second part is what if you are a programmer and you want to do things, something with it, what can you do? And the thing is that, as I said, this is something that it's non-documented. Most of what I'm going to explain today, it's just I've extracted it either from the forum of Webflow or either by looking directly at the source code, because there's a lot of obscurity inside what's going on with this library, but not in a bad way. That just it's not meant to be something that people can be using. So yeah, just keep in mind that everything that I'm saying is just information that I've extracted, how I could, what's possible. Maybe we missed something, maybe we explained something that you didn't know. That's great, but yeah, that's it. Okay, shall we start?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's put some context first. Let like what the hell is it's the front end library, right? Um, Anybody who's built the Webflow site, you've probably used features like interactions, forms, sliders, tabs, lightboxes, all these components or features that are not only HTML and CSS, but also some kind of functionality that you can implement in your Webflow site, that is using JavaScript. You cannot implement most of these functionalities without JavaScript. So Webflow has a front-end library. And one thing that you can do always is, you probably already seen it, but when publishing a site, there's these advanced options, and it already talks about some JavaScript. So it says here that, minify JavaScript. The reason is because there's a JavaScript file, actually two, but there's a JavaScript file that Webflow injects in your site. So let's see it. Let's check it out. I just cloned the template here. This template, it's, I think it's the first free template in the marketplace. I always use the same one because it's the first one. This is a note for Webflow. Maybe they could sort randomly the templates, because I'm always using the same one. But anyways, when you inspect the site and you view the page source, maybe here we are already entering a place that many people does not check often. But you can go down to the bottom of the source code. And actually, let me unminify the HTML, because it's going to be simpler to see it. Let's wait a second. Okay, let's do it again. So let's check the source code. Now it's better. Okay, so when you go down to the bottom of it, you will see that there are two JavaScript files that Webflow injects in your site. The first one is jQuery. I think that this is a separate topic to talk about jQuery, but jQuery, currently Webflow, it's still relying on jQuery. That's why they inject it always. Maybe we could talk about how does impact the jQuery impact to the page speed of the pages, but yeah, let's keep it for another stream. And the second file that you can see, it's the actual JavaScript file, the front end library. You can open it and you will see, a lot of code here. There are a lot of things going on. And we'll try to explain everything. Well, at least we'll try to do an overview of everything that's going on here on this file. So let me see, how should we start? I think that the base thing that you should know, and actually, let me just pull the console here. Whenever you want to inspect the Webflow library, you can just come here to the console and just type Webflow. Okay, this is the first start. This Webflow object, it's the main object that the library uses, and it holds all the methods that power the functionalities. And in here, you will see that there is a function that it's called the ready. This is basically just saying that Webflow is ready, do something about it. Okay. And the reason, and what's this going to do is going to call all the modules of Webflow. And when I say modules, what I mean is all the different functionalities that Webflow has. And if we recall what I said before, we're talking about Lottie, sliders, tabs, forms, interactions, all of these. So every single functionality like this, it's a module. Well, I call it a module. They probably don't call it like this, but I'll just call it a module. And each one of these has its own internal object that calls everything. So the first thing that happens when your page loads, it's basically Webflow just saying that Webflow is ready and initializing everything. And I think that we'll leave checking the modules later, because I think that we can dive into each one of them to see exactly the functionalities that this library provides. But the first thing that we can do is just inspect what's going on here at the top of the library. Okay. Do you have any questions so far, Joe? Because I think that if I don't focus myself on spelling something, I'll just be out of context constantly.
Yeah, I think it's a great next step to go and look at these methods, at least the most important ones. So People that are listening, you may have seen a piece of code that you took from the forum that says webflow.push, webflow.ready. This
Hmm.
is where that code comes from, or where that method comes from, what Alex is showing right here. So yeah, I think go through with this method. I would just give one more zoom on that console if you can.
Oh, the console. Yep.
Yeah, if we continue with the console, yes.
Mm, how about now? Better?
Great.
Yep. Okay. Nice. By the way, for seeing, demonstrating what's actually doing the Waffle library, we can already see a bunch of things here. So, for example, when we load the page and we see this interaction, this happened with the Waffle library. When we scroll down a little bit, then we see these tabs here, and we are able to switch the tabs. This is happening with the Waffle library. When we set to edit mode, if we go to the editor and the edit mode it's loaded on top of the site, that's a Webflow library. If we submit a form, that's a Webflow library. So there are a lot of things going on with this. Um, okay, so I think let's do the other way around. Sorry, Joe, but I think that we could start with the modules because then we'll first see like what does the library contain, and after that we can just get a little bit nerdy and try to do some custom coding with it. What do you think?
Great.
So okay, so if you want to inspect the library yourself, if you need to, you're brave enough to dive into the custom code to try to understand exactly how is it built. You can always come inside here, and the references that you can find, you can look for webflow.define, because this webflow.define defines every single module that goes that happens in the library. So, for example, now that we've seen the first Webflow define here that it's talking about the brand, what do you think this one manages? You can already guess it, probably.
Well, I would, I don't know. I'm going to say the Webflow
It's
badge.
it's making a spoiler here, but
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, correct. So there's a module, for example, for managing the Webflow badge, and nothing special to say about that, but you've probably seen it if you're on a site that should be branded, and actually this one it's not. But if we come here, oh no, it's in the project settings, right? The branding.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Site settings.
having the badge here, it's just some JavaScript that adds it on top of it. That yeah, nothing special about that. Um, I wanted to say something and I forgot. So when I remember, I'll say it. But let's just jump to the next module, and it's the edit mode. This one is actually interesting, and I think it's the most complex one of all of them, because actually the edit mode. Um, let's explain actually how it works. So when you go to the editor, if you ever tried the editor, actually you're not going to the editor. You're just going to the site itself. So you're loading the site. But what clicking on this does, so when you go to here, you click this. What's going to happen is that Webflow it's going to put a cookie on your browser that's going to say that you're on editor mode. And once you have that cookie, the frontend library detects that cookie, and then it's going to say, "Oh, it's editor mode. We should put the editor mode on top of the site." So the only thing that happens is you load the page. There's a cookie of the editor, and then the Webflow library detects that, and it loads some extra JavaScript. So because the JavaScript for the editor UI, it's not bundled inside here, but once it loads the JavaScript and it creates the UI, then you're able to use the editor. Wait, what? We can just check it. It basically it's the same URL, but now the Webflow, the frontend library created this, and it allows me to make all the communication, all the changes through the editor mode.
Can I ask a
But
question?
I think yes, go ahead.
So I load the site. Webflow says, "Hey, this person wants to be in editor mode," from
Hmm.
that method from the Webflow.js file. And then once it says this person wants to be in editor mode, it's then going to call another file that
Yep.
loads the UI.
Yep.
Nice.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that was smart because instead of bundling everything together
Yeah.
in the same front-end
Unnecessary.
library, you're just loading it conditionally. This is something that we also do in attributes, for example. This is a
Yeah.
good practice. So not everyone
Nice.
is loading everything that they need. Um, and also, but not only that, but you'll notice when we inspect all of this that's happening here, if somebody is following the same but on a different site, they might see some modules missing because Webflow only adds the modules whenever you have them in the project. I don't know if they do it for all of them, but for example, I know that for commerce they do it. So if you have a project that has commerce and a project that does not have commerce, the project with commerce will have the commerce module included here in the front-end library, but the project that does not have e-commerce, it's not going to be included. So I know that they do also a little bit of filtering of what goes inside this file with whatever you have activated in your project. Although I think that it can be improved, but we'll see. We'll see. Let's just continue doing inspecting. If you see any questions from people, just let me know. But okay, let's jump next one. This one is actually very simple. It's just the if you remember the functionality for focus visible, they included a module to add a polyfill. So in case that you're using a browser that does not provide the focus visible, it just support it. So they apply this polyfill. Polyfill is just um, a way of writing a functionality that it's not supported by the browser. So maybe a browser that's modern, like the latest Chrome, it supports Focus Visible, so it does not do anything. But then with Internet Explorer or something like that, that it's old, then it requires the polyfill to be able to trigger the Focus Visible. Um, I think, but yeah, and I think it's the same also for Focus Within and for Focus. So these three are polyfilled whenever there is something failing. Let's just jump to the next one. Okay, interactions. This is actually the most interesting one. How to start? I think it would be nice if everyone understands how actually interactions work. So since the very beginning, when you create the interactions in the Webflow project to when you publish it, because you need to know that if you create a lot of interactions for your site, you're essentially bloating the front-end library, the file that contains the front-end library, and you'll see why. So you can see here that this is a module that's called ix2, okay? And the way that this module is started is, let's go down to the bottom of this. Okay, everyone who has at least one interaction in their project, they will see that at the end of the front-end library, the file, there is this line in here that it's the Webflow interactions init. Okay, and this init, what it's doing, it takes a JSON object with the data, the information of all the interactions that there are on the site. And you can see I cloned this project from the marketplace. It has a bunch of interactions. Let's see, for example, how many interactions there are. There are not that many, actually. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 interactions. Maybe there is some page load or something else, but let's say 7 to 8 interactions in total. And you can see already that all this code, all of this, all of this belongs to the interactions that I created. Well, I did not, but the template has in the Webflow project. That's a bunch of code, actually. It's not lightweight, to be honest. All of this belongs to 6 interactions. So you got to be very careful with the amount of interactions that you're putting on your site, because you're essentially bloating the size of this file. This is something that a lot of people does not know, and it's interesting to see. But yeah, going back to the actual module. Go ahead.
Can I
Ask
ask
me any
2
questions.
questions just to
Yes, go ahead.
confirm here? First question, if I add 0 interactions to my project, this code will not show up in the JavaScript file. Is that correct?
Yep, correct. Not even
Okay.
the module. So this, if you
Okay.
try to call this, it's gonna return undefined.
Okay. So if you want a really lightweight site and you can get by with some CSS hover effect interactions, CSS type interactions, maybe don't add interactions to your site. You're adding code to the site. And then the next question is, if I have hundreds of interactions, would this code become a lot longer?
Yes, and actually, let's
What
inspect
are you bringing
the
up?
Finsweet.
Oh no, it's going to be a lot.
Because I think there are a lot of interactions here, right? Let's let's see. Um, let's try to find the. Okay, 1 second. And one interesting thing that, oops, I skipped it, I think. One interesting thing that Webflow does, and I would like to ask them why do they do it, is that they put the library at the end of the body instead of the head with a defer tag. We can talk about the difference between them, but I mean it would be the same output, but it would load faster. So I don't know exactly do they don't why don't they do it. Okay, Finsweet. Let's see. Interactions. I think that's still interactions. No, let's see. Okay, can you see my mouse,
Mhm.
Joe? Okay,
Yep.
so from here all the way to the bottom, it's just interactions. So it's
Whoa.
almost doubling the size of the library.
Wow.
So all of this are just interactions data. So yeah,
That's a
it's
lot.
it's that's a lot. We can inspect actually the size of it. So if you open the developer console and you go to the network and you filter by JavaScript, let's see. Um, let's see. Web font, email, Webflow. So this one, it's my zoom. It's sorry. I know that you want to have zoom, but I can not see what's going on.
Yeah, no problem.
So the library, the front end library that we have here, it's almost 200 kilobytes, being mostly half of it interaction. So we're talking about 100 kilobytes of just interaction data. That's quite a lot when talking about JavaScript. Not gonna lie, that's quite a lot, and it probably affects the page speed. Um, so yeah, just be aware that a lot of interactions can affect the bundle size of the front end library. Okay, now
So
that
have
we
meaningful interactions. That's the message here. Don't just add interactions to add them. And actually,
yeah.
before we go on, there's a couple of good questions about jQuery that I'd love to
Hmm.
answer here. Demetrius asks, so Webflow uses jQuery from inside the Webflow library. Is that
Yep,
true? Okay.
it does.
So
Yeah.
yes, the answer to this is yes. And then we have another question from Moon Design. Does IX2 rely on JQuery, or is JQuery just used for stuff like tabs?
It does rely on jQuery. Yeah. IX2, it's built on a library that's called tram.js. And I was about to dive into that later, but we can just talk about it now. This library is a jQuery library for animations, and the the funny thing is that this library is outdated since 2016. So it's been almost 6 years. This library has been outdated. So there's definitely better ways of doing it, and actually we can discuss it about we can discuss about that later because people is asking if JZap is the future of Webflow, and I can, if I give you my opinion, it's not, but we can jump in it later if you want to. Um, so this Tram.js is just a, oh, actually, maybe it's not jQuery based. Sorry,
Mm.
Tram. Wait a second, because I thought that it was. No, yeah, it does. Depends on jQuery. Okay, yeah.
Okay,
Um,
there we go.
It does. Yeah, so you need to have jQuery on your page to be able to use Tram, which is what powers the IX2. But if you inspect the library, the entire library, you will see a lot of dollar signs for the jQuery. Actually, it's funny to inspect the library, um, because you can see actually the evolution of the library between things that are very old that are purely jQuery based to then things that are a little bit newish and they are built using Flow, which is a TypeScript alternative. So it's kind of like a TypeScript version, but it's another superset. And actually, nowadays nobody uses it at all. Everyone uses TypeScript, and then you can see some vanilla JavaScript, and I believe that that's the latest stuff. So you can actually see the how everything has been changing, which makes me wonder actually if we will ever see a an entire rebuild of this library. If they just recreate it from scratch, trying to improve everything related to the size or performance with interactions, with the usage jQuery, etc. Because unless they do that, we'll still be seeing jQuery shipped in all our projects, which is a pity,
Mhm,
honestly.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, maybe someday we'll see some news about being able to disable jQuery on the site, which will allow us to remove like 100 kilobytes of JavaScript out of the box.
I think we're
Just
going to see
right.
that.
I think
I
that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we will. Webflow is really evolving in
Hmm.
the right direction. So this was launched how many years ago? Maybe 4 years ago, IX2? So it's a while ago.
Well, I can see Tram probably.
Yeah.
I don't know
Webflow is a completely
when.
different company than when they built this, so yeah,
Yeah.
I see this going in the right direction for sure.
So let's shall we actually let's get nerdy with IX interactions later. Let's move on with another module and then we'll come back to interactions. What do you think?
Great. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so another module, the links, and this one it's interesting because what people thinks about, so when you have a button here, everyone knows that you can add a what's it the current state. So I can just put this here and then I can style the current state of the button. But actually, this is not regular CSS because usually you can everything that you see here, the hover, the press, the focus, the visited, all of these are pseudo states in CSS. So you can pick a CSS class and you can style specific state. But the current state of any link, it's actually not a pseudo state valid CSS pseudo state. This is actually Webflow adding custom JavaScript for to all the links when they match a specific criteria. So when either you're watching a section on a page and the button is pointing to an anchor an anchor section, when you do this, a page section. So when you do this and you add a page section, Webflow is going to add some JavaScript that will check if the user is actually scrolling past the header in this case, but it could be any section that you define. Or when you have a page, Webflow is going to check if that page is the one that the user is currently on. And then in both cases, it's going to add a CSS class that it's called w active. Actually, let's see. Let's publish this. There are a lot of things actually related to Webflow adding or removing classes or elements that it's not regular CSS. And you'll see that a lot in when we get to the forms, because the forms are actually interesting. So if we see this button, it was not active. It was w current. So this class that you can see here, it's basically Webflow detecting that this button is pointing to the same page that we are at, and then it's adding the CSS class. And actually, when you're styling this in here, what you're styling in the background is this w current class. If we put some styles, we could see it. But yeah, I think everyone gets it. Alex, you better check your windows. Bless forever speaking. Okay, so yeah, let's move on with the next one. Scroll is just another module that helps defining both what I said about checking if what you're saying it's pointing to some anchor link, or the scrolling on the page, because what you let's hit this button and point to where's navigation. Not navigation. Let's say header, banner. Let's go to the footer. Let's say just whatever, random. So when you do this and you click random, let's publish. So when you click an anchor link that goes on the same page, the effect that you're seeing of your page scrolling, it's not the native HTML CSS behavior. It's actually Webflow doing it with JavaScript. So when I click this and it brings me down to this section, it's Webflow doing it with JavaScript. And I know that there are some ways of changing the speed of that. I know that there was a hidden attribute that you could add here. I think that Vincent had it on his page, on the manifest page. There's a blog post that has that. I always forget about the attribute, but if you go to Vincent's site, you will see that there's an attribute that allows you to change the speed of scrolling, and also it allows you to change the centering of the target, I think. So you can either scroll up to the top, or you can scroll to the middle or to the bottom, something like that. I think it was possible to do. So yeah, basically there's JavaScript managing the scrolling.
And
Go ahead.
We have some people in the chat saying data scroll speed, and someone else,
Thanks.
and again, data scroll offset. So there you go. Just like in attributes, where you apply attributes to elements and then the JavaScript communicates with attributes, it's the same thing. Data scroll speed, and then Webflow's JavaScript file is communicating with that data scroll speed to then adjust the JavaScript settings.
Yep, correct. This touch is just, I think it's just handling whenever the user is on a touch device. We'll get to that in a second, because there's actually a cool helper that maybe people find it useful. Commerce, it's just managing commerce. So everything related to the cart, opening and closing the cart, adding new items to the cart, removing the items, adding the add to the cart button, everything related to the commerce, it's also handled by a piece of JavaScript from the frontend library. Forms. This one is very interesting. I have a lot of things to say about this one. um, and we can start by basically just, is there a contact page or something here? Template company, maybe in the company. Come on. They have this contact, but there's no form. I just add one. So actually, and don't kill me. I know this is ugly, but I'll just say like that. When you're submitting a form in Webflow, it uses JavaScript to publish the site, to publish the site, sorry, to submit that form data to the server, which means that actually the forms from Webflow are not accessible if the user cannot run JavaScript on their device. This is something that you need to be aware of. If you're ever building a site for a government or for any institution that requires supporting devices without JavaScript, be aware that the forms do not work without JavaScript. So actually, when you submit this like that and you hit submit, the Webflow, the front-end library, it's going to prevent the native submission of the form, and then it's going to use JavaScript to post that to the API that processes all the form submissions. And this actually, I noticed that when we were working on some accessibility stuff, because if you disable JavaScript, let's just disable JavaScript. By the way, tip for everyone, you can disable JavaScript on your browser. If we disable JavaScript and we hit submit, look what happened. It just refreshed the page and made a regular submission, but it actually did not submit anything at all. This submission did not go through because there was no JavaScript processing it. So Webflow, if somebody's listening here, the forms should have an action by default that point that point to the Webflow server, so people without JavaScript can submit the forms. But anyways, that's not the topic today. Let's enable again. But not only that, it's happening with JavaScript. Another thing that happens with JavaScript, and a lot of people actually does not know about that, it's that when you add a radio button or a checkbox, what you see here of custom, yeah,
can you zoom in a little bit more, please? Sorry for cutting you off. Just a little bit more.
You know what's happening?
Oh, you're in
I
that
think
over zoomed.
I'm at the limit. Yeah,
that's okay. Okay, keep going.
And
all
this,
good.
Okay. So when you pick a checkbox or radio button and you select the custom in here, that essentially allows you to update how does the checkbox look like. So I can come here and I can say, I don't know, like more width, I can make it bigger, more height, and I can change the background. Let's put something very ugly. This is not regular HTML and CSS. This is happening because of JavaScript. Be aware of that, because actually the custom checkboxes have some accessibility concerns, especially when you're using interactions with them. And also, I think that that's a separate topic. We could have an accessibility stream on another time. But let's inspect what's going on with this. Usually, when let's put another one that's just the regular one, default, like that. Okay, just 1 second. So usually when you inspect a checkbox, what you expect to see, it's just the label. Whoops. The label wrapping the input. So the input is the actual checkbox, and the label is just the label with the text of it. And then there's a span here that just has whatever content we want to show. But in the case of a custom checkbox, if we inspect the other one, look what happened. The input here is actually hidden. So you're not dealing with an input. What you're dealing with is with a div. What you're seeing here, it's a div block that has a bunch of CSS classes that have been styled based on the styles that you added here. Um, and you can see that checking and unchecking the checkbox, what's doing is just adding CSS classes on top of this checkbox that change the style of it. So whenever you're dealing with custom radios or checkboxes, you're actually dealing with an element that has JavaScript using that. Any questions for this? I see a lot
That's
of
good
people
to
asking
know.
questions, but
Yeah, let's bring up a question. This is not exactly related to forms, but it's a good
no, it's
one.
fine.
Spencer asks, is the JavaScript file size based only on the published pages, or are draft pages and JSON included?
You know what, Spencer? I don't know. You will have to do some tests yourself because I never tried that.
Yeah,
I would say
you
I
know,
would say that
it's by
the
project.
interactions are probably. I mean, yeah, it's by project, but I think he's asking if inside that project you have a draft page and you add interactions or components to that draft page, if it's going to be bundled
Yeah.
in the output. I would say that yes, especially interactions, because interactions, when you create them, they are globally available to the entire project. They are not tied to a specific element on that page. You actually have the interaction selected there. I don't know. We would have to do some tests. So Spencer, I encourage you to try it. Just go ahead and try it yourself and let us know because I'm interested.
Nice. Okay, so I think that's it for the questions. Um, yeah, Spencer with a follow up. If I don't use every part of a template, will I still bloat my JavaScript? Like Alex said, I think this is a yes, and that's why when you add e-commerce to a site, it's like only add e-commerce to a site if you're going to use e-commerce because it adds a lot of things
Yeah,
to the project. So yeah, Spencer, we can't confirm 100%, but yes, using that template with a bunch of extra stuff will bloat your JavaScript file.
probably yes. Yeah.
Probably
Okay,
yes.
so if we move on, because I'm seeing that we're actually running out of time. You can
Let's
see that there are
can we
more. Go ahead.
we can cover a little bit on forms, but let's actually go back up to IX2 if that's
Yeah,
okay. We have a lot of
yeah.
questions about that and I think a lot of people are interested. So this can be kind of like IX2 and forms in the JavaScript file.
Okay. Um, okay. Was there any question that was not answered, or
I don't think so, but let me
okay?
go check the questions and we can keep going.
No, but yeah, it's fine. Okay. Well, just as a summary, every module like slider, tabs, all of that, it's also included in the front end library. And I think that they are only included whenever you add them because, as you can see, there is no slider module in this project because there is no sliders. There's just tabs. So actually, Webflow is smart about that because if there's a component that you don't add to the page, it's actually not included in the final bundle. That's very interesting. Um, but let's jump into interactions. I just type here webflow.require ix2. Okay, this it's just a way of calling a module. So every module that we talked about, you can actually call it like this. So if we say webflow.require tabs, you can also access the tabs. If you say webflow.require nav bar, I think it was nav bar. Lottie, I don't know if there's any Lottie. Nope. What else did I say? Forms. So every single module you can access it with this Webflow require. And if you're nerdy and you want to check, maybe things that you can do with it, go ahead and try it yourself. So every single Webflow.define that you find inside the frontend library, you can access it using the require command in here. And you can see, for example, that the interactions one has a bunch of methods, the tabs one has a bunch of methods, etc. Um, for example, the tabs has one method that is interesting that we use in the CMS tabs attribute, that it's the redraw method that essentially takes any new items that you added inside the tabs panel and creates the correspondent tab links. You know what I mean? Actually, there's just one more thing that I wanted to mention for that. Because if you know about attributes, how attributes work, attributes is just a way of, you add attributes on an element, and then when the JavaScript loads, we add a functionality on top of it. The funny thing is that all the components from Webflow actually work the same way. So when you check any component like the tabs or the sliders or whatever, you will see a bunch of attributes defining the settings. The duration, out, the easing. All of these settings are actually set through the through here, through the settings of the component, the easing, the fade in, the fade out, etc. So out of the box, when the page loads, there are a lot of attributes, a lot of elements that are not included in the raw HTML, but instead the frontend library generates them. For example, the slider dots. When you have the slider and you have all the dots on it, all those dots are dynamically created with JavaScript by Webflow. And there's a method for redrawing all the sliders and recreating all the dots for each slider. So I recommend that you check every single module to see exactly what you can do with it, because there are a lot of things that maybe you can build something cool with it. Okay, enough of talking about separate things. Let's talk about IX2. There was somebody, Pablo Cortez, do you know if legacy interactions work the same way as the regular IX2? I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. But are you using legacy interactions? That's the question. Why are you using legacy interactions? I don't know, Pablo. I'm sorry. Okay, so IX2, I think it's the most complex module of it. And as I said, it uses tram in the background. And if you're curious, when you access the Webflow object, you will see that there are a lot of functionalities, a lot of methods inside it. And you can actually access the tram library. So if for any reason you want to create an animation with JavaScript instead of using the interactions, you can actually, the tram library is included out of the box with Webflow. So you could say something like, hold on, I created a small snippet just for demonstration. You could say something like, let's pick this, the browse menu. I'll store this in a variable. So now we have a variable that's called temp1, which is the element. Let's put it here so you can see it. So the temp1, it's this element. And we could say something like Webflow tram add opacity. Now we are adding some transition to this element. Bam. And now we can say something like Webflow tram, the element, which is temp1, add opacity of 0. And when I run this, you will see that actually it runs like if it was a native interaction. Did you see that opacity? So just be aware that you can actually access the tram library yourself. And if you want to know how does it work, just Google tram.js. You will see this GitHub page that contains a bunch of instructions. Okay, so IX2. Again, I'm just switching topics all the time. One thing that most of you probably have heard of. It's how the hell do I restart interactions, right? Um, let's talk about how the interactions work. When the page loads, so when I refresh the page, the Webflow frontend library scans all the page and checks what elements are being affected by interactions. And if there's any element that it's affected by interactions, either if it's by clicking, by scrolling past it, by whatever, Webflow adds a event listener to that element, so it can check whether you click the element, you see the element, you switch a tab, whatever, you know. So in that case, what happens is that once the library has run once, that's it. If I can we have I'll go to the showcase. Showcase UK. So for example, this button here is using an interaction for switching the toggle. You can see here. If I, with JavaScript, for whatever reason, I created another button, so I'd say it's something like this, double clonable, you will see that it behaves weirdly. Like Webflow does not understand what the hell is going on. Either it does not work, or it works but the elements are together, or things can break. So a common thing when dealing with adding elements dynamically on the page is restarting interactions. So Webflow provides a method for that. The method, it's webflow.require x2, and you will see that this init function in here restarts again the interactions. So in that case, probably everything is broken. Let's try about ready and this. How about now? Okay, so this one it's an edge case, but the thing is that whenever you type this webflow require.init, it's going to scan again all the elements from the page and just apply any interactions that there are there. And this is very important when you're dealing with dynamic elements. Imagine, for example, CMS filter or CMS load, that we use it to dynamically add more elements on the page. So we load the elements and then we append them on the page. In that case, if you have interactions, we need to restart interactions so Webflow can know about them. We can get a little bit more nerdy about interactions, and this is just for people who understands a little bit of coding. But if you ever work with Redux, with this, which is a state manager that's usually used for React, the Webflow interactions engine actually uses Redux in the background. Whoops, acquire. Sorry. So you will see that there's actually some actions and there's a store, and this is because it's Redux. Redux holds the entire state of the interactions, and we can check it if we go to the store and we say get state like that. This is going to return an immutable object that contains the state of the interactions, and this is very interesting if you like diving into how things work, because inside this state you can see the entire data for the interactions. So you can see all the actions. You can see here select checkbox, unselect checkbox, open the option, close dropdown, everything that's tied to these interactions. You can see all the events that are triggering those interactions, like mouse click, scrolling into view, all of that. You can see the media queries if something is changing. You can see the elements that are being bind to an interaction. So for example, let's see. I'll just zoom out one, because if not, I cannot show here. I'm sorry, Joe. um, so for example, if we scan the cards, you can see that this card that has a hover interaction in it. This one, it's reference, and we can see every single interaction that's tied to that element, so you can inspect that. Another cool thing that you can check, it's actually the state. So for example, let me go back. If we check the state now and we check the session state, I think it was event state. Yeah, correct. You can see the state of every single item. You can see right now here that we just have a bunch of states. Let's say, for example, that uh, let's do it again. Let's say, for example, that I click this item here that has an interaction clicking. If I click it and we scan again the state, now you'll be able to see that the click count for this interaction has been registered here. So if you ever need to do actions based on how an interaction is triggered, like the scroll percentage of a scroll interaction, or if a click interaction if has been fired, the first click or the second click, all this stuff, you can access it through this Redux store. It's very interesting, and this opens a lot of possibilities if you're creative with it. Um, but yeah, that's the main thing about interactions. The only thing that I would last to say is when you restart interactions, the state it's lost. So for example, imagine that I have clicked this checkbox, right? I have clicked this toggle, and right now the state it's on the second click. So the next time that I click, it's going to fire the second click interaction. If I restart interactions, I just clicked it, but now it's not working. And now it's going the other way around. You can see now that when it's filtering by clonable, it's actually not cloning. It's actually not selected here. I just reversed it. And the reason is because whenever you restart interactions, the state it's lost. So this is something that you need to be aware of when you have interactions that depend on first state and second state. So first click, second click, hover on hover, all these things. But and here comes a present for all of you. There's a way of preserving state, and I'm going to make a little bit of publicity for this, but we have a public repository that it's called Finsweet TS utils. And this is also an npm package, and this is just for people who knows about coding, because I'm not going to explain now how to use an npm package. But if you install this package, you can access the actual helper that we use in Finsweet for restarting all the interactions. That it's called Restart Webflow. And this Restart Webflow contains a code snippet for preserving the state. So this not only you're restarting interactions, you can also restart other modules like the tabs, the sliders, the comments, lightboxes. You can restart everything. And also the interactions, when restarting them, we actually store the state, and when restarting the interactions, we put back the state again to where it was before. And this solves the issue about the state not being preserved. So if you're a coder and you would like to check it out, it's called a method restart webflow that you can extract from the TS utils package. So I see that you're checking a lot of
Very
comments. I
nice.
have not checked one.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments. All good. I shared the link to the GitHub in this chat
Oh,
here.
cool.
We are coming up to the hour. We're not going to stop exactly at the hour because I want to make sure that we leave this topic with a good next step. So let's bring up a comment from Mike. Could you give us
Hey,
an
Mike.
example of accessing a listed method to do something fun? And I'm going to just change this question a little bit to, can you give the people listening some kind of homework or next step in this learning? something that people can actually go at any level and just try something, right? Like a little bit of code to access this or do something with this. How can people take a next step here, Alex?
Okay. Well, I mean, talking about interactions, what people could try it's with JavaScript dynamically add a new element on the page and make sure that that element has interactions in it. So imagine that you have a class interaction for a button. You know, I take this button and I add an interaction that affects all the button classes. So when clicking on this button, it does whatever. I show a model. I trigger a confetti at whatever you could do with interactions. Okay, and dynamically create a new button, add it to the page, and then restart interactions. So the interactions engine detects that button and also works when clicking on it. That would be something that it's really helpful and it's really handy to know how to do. Um, the second thing, and actually I realized that we have not mentioned it, it's try running code only after Webflow has finished loading. And this is very important. And actually, Joe, I think that I would like to mention to talk about it just
Yeah,
super quick
let's do it. Yeah.
because Webflow provides a helper method that it's called, where am I? Oh, this is super long. This must be from Finsweet. Let's do it again. So Webflow provides a method that it's called Webflow.push. You've probably seen it, this Webflow.push. What this method does is it allows to run a callback only after Webflow has been loaded. And why would you want to do that? For example, why is it not enough to run code using the DOM content loaded element event? You know, because there are some regular events that you can listen when the page has finished loading. So here's another challenge: try to load a page that contains some tabs, and when the page loads, try to switch the tab to another tab. For example, right now the current active tab is the first one, but maybe for any reason, because there's a cookie, a query parameter on the URL, because you did something, the user did something, you want to show that user a different tab. In that case, you would want to switch the tabs, okay? But if you try to click any of these tabs right when at the end of the body, right when the page has finished loading, it will probably not work because what's actually adding the functionality of switching tabs, it's the Webflow library, and the Webflow library maybe has not finished loading when the entire HTML has been parsed. So in that case, this callback that you can see here, and actually you can just copy it from here. So you can just take this, it's defining either Webflow or an array. So you can just copy this, and then you can copy the Webflow.push. And inside this push, you can add a function. It can be a function, can be an arrow function. I'll just do an arrow function. And you can say something like console log, hey. In this case, it's just going to run because Webflow is already loaded. So this ensures any code that you run will run just after Webflow has initialized everything: forms, tabs, sliders, everything. If you want to interact with slider dots, you need to wait until Webflow has finished. If you want to interact with a custom radio or a custom checkbox, you need to wait until Webflow has finished. The same for everything that it's Webflow JavaScript related. So that's another thing that you could try.
Nice. Those are good next steps. There are actually some really great questions. I wish that we could just keep going and keep going and keep going, but we will not do that because we're going to be respectful of everybody's time and we have this every single week. So if you want to hear topics, tell us about them. Tweet at us, tell us what you want to learn. Come to our pro meetings We actually scheduled the next 2 build days based on what the pros said on this Wednesday at our meeting. So next week, we are doing how to deploy code for Webflow using the Finsweet method, which is through NPM. So last week, we talked about 3 different options how to deploy code for Webflow. We covered the first 2 and we left the third one. Next week, we're talking all about the third one, start to finish. And then something else the next week. So we'll be back talking about this more and more and more. Okay. So Alex, do you have any final comments to everybody here watching?
Ask us questions, because
Yeah.
actually the every as you just said, all the topics that we're actually presenting here, I think that we are always going to prioritize what people wants to know. I mean,
Yes.
I could start just being nerdy here and presenting stuff that maybe people does not care about that. So I think it's great if everyone just asks questions. Can be here in the YouTube channel, could be in Slack community, could be on Twitter, could be anywhere. Just ask us questions about, hey, I want to know how to do this or how does this work, whatever. Because then I'm motivated. I'm super happy to say, okay, let's talk about it. Let's just make a stream about that. So yeah, and again, by the way, thank you for being here. Super excited. So yeah, just keep asking questions.
Excellent. Great. So we are learning more about technical every Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern. You should definitely be here. This is already turning into a hot show. Next Tuesday, we are live with Harshit to do 2 live builds. We're going to do a live build with our new social share attribute solution. And then also, we are releasing our query param solution, and we're going live to show you how it works. This is a great marketing tool for anybody that does anything with URL query parameters or wants to. So that's next Tuesday, 2 30-minute sessions into 1 hour. And that is all we're talking about today. Great. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and have a great rest of the day. Alex, final goodbye. Say
Goodbye. Thank you.
it. Done.
Thank you, everyone.
Now we're done.
Yay.